All right. Hello, everyone, and
Hello.
welcome. Hey,
Hello.
Raekwon. Welcome to our Ujima Talk. And today we will talk about, well, actually, let me go back. My name is Chris Robinson, and I serve here at Ujima as the Director of Training and Technical Assistance, the National Center on Violence Against Women in the Black Community. Today's conversation centers on the realities and impact of community violence and the power of collective community response within Black communities. We'll also explore why prevention is essential and how communities can work together to create a safer, healthier environments for everyone. So I am honored to be joined by two incredible leaders in this work, Antonia Drew Norton and Kalan Fleming of Asha Family Services Incorporated. Before we jump into our discussion, I'd love to invite each of you to introduce yourselves and share a little about your background, just to give our viewers an opportunity to learn more about who you are and the expertise and lived experience you bring to today's conversation. So, welcome. I'll have you go first, the Antonia Norton.
Okay. Thank you. Just thrilled to be here. And I love the questions um, that you have laid out for us, particularly to get to that to that goal of talking about prevention. My name is Antonia Drew Norton, as you've heard. I've been in the field of family violence since 1988, about 1987. I am the founder and executive director of Asha Family Services. That is one of the first culturally specific African American programs in the United States. We definitely are the first in Wisconsin. Um, my work expand with victims in particular in prison systems, within the community, and also working with men in institutions and in the community to come up with culturally competent services for them. So my work spans many decades, and I'm just thrilled to be here.
Well, I am so honored to be sitting in your presence, and thank you so much for the work you have contributed to culturally specific services and housing and Black women in the Black community. Thank you so much. Kalan, I'll have you go.
Yes, hi, my name is Kalan Fleming, and I serve as Director of Victim Services at Asha Family Services here in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. I started off as I'm a victim advocate, and then I moved to case management, and I rapidly advanced to leadership role right now. I oversee a team of women who are advocates who are dedicated to providing survivor-centered services grounded in culturally responsive and trauma-informed care. And also provide care for individuals impacted by domestic violence and related forms of abuse. I earned my bachelor's degree in psychology from Central Michigan University, and I'm a proud mother of three. I also bring both my professional dedication and my personal passion to my work because I am a survivor as well. So I am committed to supporting survivors and strengthening communities impacted by violence.
Yes, thank you so much, Kalan, and thank you for your experience and just being dedicated to the community and moving forward. So I wish you the best on your journey as you continue to serve our community. Thank you
Thank
both.
you.
Okay, so let's get right into it. Um, can you first talk to us? You both shared a little bit about yourselves, but can you first talk to us about how you both got into this work and why culturally specific services matter to you and should matter to everyone else?
Okay. I am firmly convinced that my arrival in this work during the 1980s was and continues to be through my lived experiences, my love for my people, and endless interactions with Black women. which led me to discovering my passion and my purpose. So, as a survivor and the last 3 decades as a provider, I learned long ago that domestic violence in this country was built on frameworks that did not account for the historical realities of the Black community. Those frameworks often treated violence as isolated behavior between individuals rather than understanding how racism, poverty, overpolicing, historical trauma, housing inequities, and systemic disinvestment created the conditions where violence could flourish. So that's what brought me into the field to try to create another option.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Kalan, how have you go?
So I got into this work through my own lived experience as well as a domestic violence survivor. And when I made the decision to leave in Muskegon, Michigan, where I'm from, I had no resources. I had no guidance. I had no support that I qualified for at the time. And so in that time, I felt alone. I felt really isolated. And I had to really rely on my faith to get through that time. And in that moment, I realized that I needed to go back to school and become the help and support that I needed and couldn't find. And so after I
Mhm,
got my bachelor's
mhm.
degree, I moved to Milwaukee and found my purpose here at Asha Family Services. And today I use both my professional and my lived experience to support survivors. And I'm passionate about that because I don't want others to feel as alone as I did back then. And that's why culturally specific services matter to me and should matter to everyone, because it's not a one size fit all, right? We're
Mhm.
not, we have to meet people with immediate understanding. We have to have shared experiences. We have to show up and provide dignity and respect. We also have to protect and support our most vulnerable community members because our community is only whole and safe as our most vulnerable members.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you so much. If I can just ask a follow-up because our community is not a monolith, right?
No.
We seek services in a different way. We all come from different communities. We have different um backgrounds and cultures. I wanted to ask just a little follow-up, like what keeps you committed after all these years of both of your experience? What keeps you committed knowing that like we're so different in so many different ways, but what keeps you both as advocates committed to serving our community?
For me, that's assuring culturally specific services, which shows up in my decades of policy work and program design. Culturally specific services for any cultural group matters,
Mhm. Thank
and
you.
particularly so for those from communities of color. For examples, it matters in the Black community because survivors do not experience violence outside of culture, race, history, and community context. As such, I initially began working with, as I said earlier, with women in prisons and in the community while I was guided by an academic scholars to create another option for Black women that was designed by and for them.
Mm.
That option was Asha Family Services. And I, for any cultural group, it is critical that we design the services. So as we learn more about our community, more about who we serve, and are able to tie in the historical factors that shape us and the external factors that
Mhm.
shape us.
Mhm.
So that's the thing that keeps me in, and which equally is making sure that we reproduce ourselves.
Yes.
So, mentoring advocates across the country is something I've done for years, similar with Kalan, and finding someone who is so much like me
Mhm.
as a young advocate and being able to pour information, how we got here, into this program, into this work.
Yeah.
So that keeps me in it.
Yes. Thank you. I love that so much. You said one thing about, designing programs that are for us by us. And I feel like that's essential, as you mentioned, across all cultures. I feel like that's where survivors really thrive when programs or when organizations are catered to their cultural background, their language, and when I was working in direct services and I worked at a shelter program, I wanted to ensure that I intrigued all the senses, like giving food when they come in, giving a hug, having someone do something with their children, just making sure that I'm meeting their needs, having someone, not just an interpreter, but a person who speaks the dialect,
Yes.
because you can have someone to speak your language, but the dialect and the twang and the slang,
Yes.
So yeah, so thank you both for that. I love it. So I wanted to ask another question, which is, how have you seen violence show up for Black survivors? And then how is community understanding how violence shows up, or the greater or the greater impact it has on our communities? I could read that over for you if you want me to.
Um, let's see. I think I got it.
Okay.
Okay, so when we talk about how violence shows up for Black survivors, I think we must begin by understanding that violence rarely exists in isolation. Too often, people view domestic violence only through the lens of a single incident between two individuals.
Yeah.
But for Black survivors, violence exists within a much broader context of historical trauma, systemic inequities, economic instability, community violence, racism, housing insecurity, substance use,
Mhm.
and generations of unresolved pain. So, for Black survivors in particular, violence often shows up not only as physical harm, coercive control, emotional or sexual violence, and financial abuse within these intimate relationships, but also as compounded trauma connected to the environments in which many families are forced to live and survive. We cannot separate domestic violence from the larger conditions impacting Black communities. Something you hear me say often is that violence does not begin with the moment someone is assaulted.
Mm.
Violence is the inevitable outcome of unresolved trauma, learned behaviors, structural oppression, economic instability, untreated substance and mental health, and generations of normalized harm. So, too often we isolate violence as though it begins with a single incident between two people, but violence is rarely spontaneous. It develops predictably within environments where chronic inequity and systemic harm have been allowed to persist over generations.
And
Woo.
I just want to add that everything that she just spoke of, all of these barriers can make it harder for survivors to speak up and or to leave safely. And more people are beginning to understand that intimate partner violence and domestic violence are not just private matters anymore. They're public health crises. And when trauma exists in the home, it eventually ripples into our schools, into our streets, and into our communities.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. I mean, so I have a book here and a pen because I'm taking notes, and Tony is writing a dissertation right here with her words, and I'm trying to make sure I'm capturing it. Oh my goodness, mic drop. Okay, the panel is hot. Oh my gosh. Yes, I totally agree. Like, violence is often just discussed as only as physical abuse. Physical abuse. It includes everything. Like, it includes so many different factors. It can include emotional, financial,
Yes,
sexual abuse,
yes,
technology abuse, which is something that, we've seen grow more and over time is, cyber abuse. And also, like you mentioned, Antonia, coercive abuse.
yeah,
So,
coercive control.
yes, absolutely. Thank you both. Okay, so going a little bit into like crisis intervention. So, beyond crisis intervention, what could a community-centered response to domestic violence look like?
Community
Um,
center, go ahead.
Community center response means like doing more than stepping in after harm has occurred, right? It's about building safety before a crisis happens. And this includes, education, having a healing space, providing support groups, youth programs, having faith and community partnerships is important, having family conversations and helping your neighbors understand how to respond when someone needs support.
Thank you.
And what it also looks like, we know for decades we have placed responsibility for intervention almost exclusively on systems, law enforcement, courts, shelters, prosecutors, but communities have always been the first responders
Mm,
long before institutions arrive. Prevention means teaching communities how to recognize harm early and intervene before it escalates. That's key. So, one way we are doing this at Asha Family Services in Milwaukee is through the expansion of our Ujima Men's Program, SOS, which stands for Saving Our Sisters, Saving Our Sons, and Saving Ourselves. So we cannot continue building safety strategies that begin only after someone has already been harmed. So you have to go further upstream um, to begin to address these issues.
absolutely. Absolutely. Um, something I don't remember which one of you said it, but I think it was you, Kalan, when you uplifted the fact that like community, we already possess the wisdom and the ability to start prevention within our communities. You know, a lot of times some people think, oh, my prevention begins when I enter shelter. It begins way before that. And so, I think that if the community was empowered a little bit more, to know that you possess the leadership, you have protector factors, and you have the authority to enforce those within your community. Protect your babies and your family, protecting the children and the teens. So, yeah, thank you so much for that. In what ways do culture, history, and lived experiences shape how Black communities understand and respond to domestic violence? What have you seen? What are some responses um that you both may have seen or been a part of?
In terms, and that centers many even on much on the last response. Um,
Mhm.
Communities, again, communities were always first responders in many instances, and strengths do exist,
Mm-hmm,
such as friends, family, neighbors,
mm-hmm,
pastors, barbers,
mm-hmm,
hairdressers,
mm-hmm.
teachers, extended family, and trusted elders.
Yes.
The modern field believes institutions created safety, but historically, communities created safety first and did so without information and the resources and supports the field has. However, the field has been missing some critical pieces, intentionally or unintentionally. So, for years, the field focused almost exclusively on survivor services, and rightfully so.
Mm-hmm.
But true prevention requires us to intervene differently and intentionally with those at risk of using violence
Yeah.
before they become perpetrators.
Yeah.
So if we wait until violence has already occurred, then we are no longer talking about prevention. We are responding to harm after the fact.
Mhm.
And with Asha, as I talked about the Ujima Men's Program, SOS, Saving Our Sisters, Saving Our Sons, and Saving Ourselves, this expansion of the men's program includes the Umoja Dock, a 72-hour crisis stabilization housing unit built around a simple but transformative idea: creating intervention opportunities before violence escalates further and before lives are permanently altered. SOS is a unique strategy that intentionally combines community violence intervention with domestic and intimate partner violence prevention and intervention work.
Mhm.
Historically, these systems have operated separately,
Mm.
despite the reality that community violence and domestic violence are often interconnected and rooted in many of the same underlying factors, including trauma, instability, unresolved conflict, and learned behaviors.
Mhm. Thank you,
And
Kalani.
I just want to add to that. Also how our culture and our history shapes shapes and responses to domestic violence. For many families, keeping things private and handling it within the family has been a way to survive, right? Especially when systems seem unsafe and not fair or not trustworthy. So sometimes that has led to silence and protecting the family or the community image. But the we want to at the same time we want Black communities to have you know positive responses with faith, and we have we have a resilience, and we have advocacy, and we have a deep love for one each another. And I think healing begins when we make room for honest conversations without shame, and connecting people to trusted support. It reminds survivors that asking for help is not a sign of weakness. It's protection. It's being courageous. It's showing strength, and it's a step towards safety. We have to get, away from, you know, you have to be submissive, girl. This is your husband. You need to take it. What's done at home needs to stay at home. We can't keep promoting family unity when it's not safety. We have to prioritize safety before image.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much for bringing that up because I think recognizing historical trauma and also systemic mistrust is so important. And I feel like that now that we have progressed in terms of prevention and also services, we are able to recognize the generational trauma that was before. My grandmother may not knew that she was in a domestic violence relationship. She didn't know what to call it. It was,
Right.
to your point, submission. And there was just a different response. And that's normal, right? Like, two things could be true where that we respond in our communities differently. And the response, I just love the fact that we are recognizing that there was generational trauma somewhere in our line. And now we have the ability and the education and the knowledge to, implement prevention before harm begins. I also think about like the adultification of young girls in our families,
Yeah.
talking about her size and shape and, are able to call those things out and say, that's not okay. So thank you both for that. So folks often highlight barriers to access. What strengths already exist within Black communities? I love this because I want to emphasize like we have strengths, right? And so, what strengths already exist within Black communities that can be incorporated into prevention and intervention work? So, just speaking on like what roles neighbors, families, faith leaders, barbers, hairstylists, and local businesses play on prevention and intervention work.
Okay.
So
Go ahead.
yeah, so Black communities already have the foundation for safety. We already know that, seriously. Like, we need to just build on that. We already have neighbors who are often the first to notice when something is off, when there's a weird car that hasn't been there. Like, they're the first to notice things, and something isn't right. So families, and within the Black families, we teach values, we teach faith, we provide support. Our faith leaders and pastors, they bring people together and they help the community as well. Our barbershops, our hair salons, that's a space where we all can just let go, and we just, relax, and we get conversations in. That's a trusted space for people. And schools also help shape young people as well early. And local businesses create jobs,
Yeah.
and that creates stability. And so when all these things work together, that's how we're able to prevent violence and strengthen communities. It's about investing in what's already there, which is, cohesive relationships, trust, and the leadership.
Yeah. Thank you so
And just to add to the messaging part of it that Kalam was talking about, the message for women, uh, uh, you know, the forgiveness. So this involves family, neighbors. This involves um, the carrying of messaging that abuse and violence is not acceptable.
much.
And that I believe that message must be loudest for men, fathers, brothers, uncles, with women they love, and among the men. The other piece, too, is that we have to equip communities with information. So we need, for example, culturally specific advertising to let people in that community know where resources and supports are within the community that they can that they can trust. At the same time, there has to be education and the transference of information to people in the community on what is available. So the biggest piece, that's how these different entities, the barber, the hair salon, your neighbors, your friends, as long as we can equip them with accurate information and be able to support
Mhm.
services
Mhm.
that these groups design. So again, back to, the community was always the first responder, but it didn't have the resources, the information, and the supports that the field has.
Yeah, absolutely. Um, I love that you're uplifting that because I feel like that prevention is everyone's responsibility,
It is.
and I also protection is everyone's, especially for those who can't protect themselves. And that can be broad, right? Like I
Yes.
may look like I can protect myself, but in actuality, I need some help. So I think that it is everyone's responsibility, and that's what I like to emphasize to the community and to my family as well. So, just I heard you talk about transformative a little bit. You talked about the SOS and Ujima's men's program and the transformative program, and so just speaking on that a little bit. I know it's a little bit off script, but just speaking on forgiveness, I think that's something that is a great area for our community where we talk about, like the boycotting, like sometimes some, unnamed superstars or celebrities. And we talk about, there is an area where everybody's going to listen to that person's song or everybody's going to watch that person's TV show. But in terms of transforming it, could you explain a little bit about reframing those messaging about whether the Black community, how we respond to those perpetrators and abusers, and we initiate transformative and forgiveness into our community?
What centers is accountability. So there has to be accountability. And when you're talking about particularly male artists, for example, um, you have to, men must hold men accountable.
Yes.
And that is critical and that is really important. And so if men who come into our community as an artist or whatever and is abusing women within that community, it is on the men of that community to say, hey, uh, that's not happening. And I think we saw something similar with a video and I'm not sure if it was, yeah, tip drill, some older video
Uh-huh.
that was coming on um, one of the HBCU campuses, but the fraternity brothers said, no, that's not happening.
Yeah.
And so that is just a snapshot of what has to happen within communities.
Mhm.
And men must hold men accountable.
Yeah.
But all, at the same time, women are so often taught to forgive, to keep the family together. Let me, a young woman in a courtroom made a statement because her boyfriend had gotten a lot of time for domestic violence.
Mhm.
And she was outraged. This is the new girlfriend. So he got time for the old girlfriend. And she made a comment that he got all that time, but everybody get their butt beat sometime.
Mm.
I turned around, I said, no, they don't.
Right.
But it's that kind of thinking, because when we talk about abuse and violence and what's acceptable among different generations, you will hear varying things. Younger generations will give you a list of things where they believe women deserve to be beaten.
Mhm.
So there's some dynamics going on, or the lack of information and education, that says that's unacceptable.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you so much. Victim blaming is real, and
Yes.
it
Well,
happens. It happens often. We're always placed in a position of, well, what did she do to make him respond like that?
Yes. Women are often
Yeah,
blamed.
yeah, yeah,
Um,
yeah,
so again, we have to go back to the piece. We can't talk about preventing domestic violence if we refuse to examine the environments producing violence in the first place.
yes,
And some of that has to do with misinformation, similar to what the young woman was talking about, that
yeah.
it was acceptable that everybody get their butt beat.
Uh-huh. Yeah. Yep. I hear that often. And what's so odd to me is that, I feel like we have enough education out here and resources that people should know better, but they
Yeah.
don't. You
No,
know,
they don't.
they
Uh,
don't.
they don't. And one of the things that happens is um, we don't we don't have the information out there.
Yeah.
The awareness is not out there.
Wow. Yeah.
So you don't have that information that holds people or holds behavior accountable. So
Mhm.
you have to begin to design and put this information out there that's contrary, clearly, to what others are saying. So that becomes real,
Yeah.
uh,
Yeah.
and the need for culturally responsive awareness
Mhm.
designed by and for a community, and put this information out within the communities, and for visuals or usage among populations most impacted. Where does Gen Z get their information from? Making sure you're using those platforms to
Mhm.
be able to get information out, and not making a bunch of information, meaning that 15-second, 20-second videos, because the data says they're not looking at something. You can't put a 2-minute message out there. Their patience isn't that long.
Right. The attention spans are like this. It's like scroll up, scroll up after 15 seconds. You're absolutely right.
Yes.
Um, Kalani, I don't know if you wanted to add anything, or I could move on if you would
you
like.
can move.
Okay, sure, absolutely. So staying right there where we're talking about prevention often requires difficult conversations, as you both mentioned. how do racism and economic inequalities, housing instability, cultural norms, and community violence intersect with domestic violence prevention? I feel like we've already kind of touched on some of those things, but if we could just emphasize it so people directly can um, know.
Um, eh, Kalan, were you about to say something?
No.
Okay. Um, a- Again,
Yeah.
I think we have to look at how racism and all these other factors uh, play significant roles.
Yeah.
Because again, it goes back to what we talked about earlier, that for Black women in particular, they cannot. Um, you cannot expect them to stay isolated within these communities and not have the predictability. So we often know where violence is occurring
Yeah.
simply by looking at a zip code. So
Mhm.
when someone lives, where someone lives tells us a great deal. It has an address.
Yeah.
Violence consistently shows up in the community experiencing long-term disinvestment, concentrated poverty, failing or under resourced schools, high
Mhm.
unemployment, over policing, and limited economic opportunities. So families living within these environments experience significantly higher levels of distress,
Yeah.
and many carry histories of unaddressed trauma, struggle with food insecurity, housing insecurity,
Mhm.
inadequate health care access, untreated mental health challenges, and exposure to violence as a normalized part of life.
Mhm.
So, Black survivors in particular, um, domestic violence cannot be separated from the larger social
That's
and
right.
structural conditions surrounding their lives. So, we must understand that what happens inside the home is often deeply connected to what is happening outside the home.
Yes.
So the challenge is that communities have not always fully understood violence in this broader context.
Mhm.
So too often we focus on, again, only responding after harm has occurred rather than addressing the underlying conditions producing violence in the first place.
Mhm.
So prevention is critical.
Mhm.
So, if we are serious about prevention, we must stop treating violence as isolated behavior and
Right.
begin confronting the environments, systems, and historical conditions that make violence so very predictable.
Absolutely. Violence does not occur in isolation.
No, it does not.
No.
Yeah. Yeah.
And if a survivor has to choose between, abuse and being homeless with her children, that's not a real choice, right? Prevention, it means building real support systems. We have to have safe housing. We have to find, child care resources and services people can trust. Without those, we're asking survivors to navigate danger without any real options. And safety isn't just about leaving. It's about finding somewhere safe to actually, land.
And have the supports to do so. So,
Absolutely.
violence
Mhm.
is produced by these systems,
Mhm.
history, oppression, trauma, and
Yeah.
community conditions left unexamined. So we have to ask what's missing and why. So most of the field says and asks, they'll say, someone hurt someone. How do we respond? But I argue we must go deeper and ask what conditions existed that made violence predictable? What systems normalized it? What community fractures allowed it? What historical harm shaped it? And how do we prevent it before it reaches crisis? So we must move the conversation from intervention to prevention.
Yeah.
So violence is not, again, isolated.
Absolutely.
Violence is the predictable outcome of
Mm.
unaddressed trauma, inequity, systemic oppression, historical harm, fractured structures, and cultural conditions left unattended. So again, true
Yeah.
prevention requires collective responsibility, culturally grounded intervention, accountability, healing, and structural change before violence occurs.
Yeah, yeah. And I want to drive this in a little bit more is, you know, as coming from the perspective of organizations and in the stance of, advocates, I feel like sometimes we miss how the community communicates and how to engage community. How can we better engage and collaborate with communities to do prevention, to prevent violence? How can we do that as organizations, um, and not just how we do it, but how can we do it in an authentic way? What would that look like, with providing services?
And you're talking about in terms of the field with mainstream.
Bold, yes.
Um,
Well, yes, mainstream, yes. How does organizations engage with communities and
We
collaborate?
have to first move beyond just providing services and start building real partnerships and relationships with the community. And that starts by listening, treating survivors and community members as experts, from their learned experience, from their lived experiences, right? Not just people receiving help.
Yeah.
We have to have authentic engagements, and that looks like showing up before the crises happen, building trust, being present, following through. It means investing in the community, with community-led solutions and addressing real life needs, like again, housing, economic stability, and safety. And it's ongoing. That's one of the things at Asha Family Services. We don't get our clients and just send just here, and you never hear from us again. It's a long going lifetime relationship, not part and partnership with our clients. Um, and the
Yeah.
difference is that services need to respond to the harm, and we need to know that engagement helps prevent harm, right? It's about working with communities and sharing power and building relationships so that people have what they need to stay safe in the first place.
Mm.
and to add to that, to go broader, I believe the violence prevention field, the mainstream, must look inward.
Hmm.
First and foremost, it must intentionally support efforts targeting where significant disparities lie, such as what we're experiencing now and have been trying to bring to the forefront more, the incidents of Black women being murdered
Yes.
across the country. You
Yes.
know, Wisconsin is among the top states
Wow.
where this is occurring, specifically Milwaukee. And all providers must also address a related factor to that, which is anti Blackness. Anti Blackness devalues those of darker shades. So this is across the board with all programs. Where this is most likely occurring. So we cannot effectively serve Black survivors while ignoring anti-Blackness that exists within institutions claiming to support and help them.
Mm.
So mainstream organizations must examine whether they are asking Black communities to adapt to systems that were never designed with us in mind in the first place. So we do not need communities to become more trusting of institutions. We need institutions to become more worthy of trust.
Ooh, that need to go on a shirt.
Oh,
That needs to go
did you
on a shirt.
I've been around a long time.
Yes. Come on now. She's dropping gems. And the viewers, they better catch them. They better catch them. Um, I when you're speaking, one thing that pops in my head is believe survivors. Like just believe them. If I say it happened, it happened. So often I see videos and I hear from survivors that the police didn't believe me because I didn't have marks on my skin, and we're melanated. I'm of darker skin. Marks may not show up on me,
Yeah.
and so does that mean that it didn't happen? So absolutely. And I love that you said organizations need to be worthy of the community, not the community be worthy of them. And I think also with mainstream organization is that there is this perfect survivor, like this model survivor. What is that? What is it?
And it's
What,
not us.
yeah, right, exactly. You have in your head of what a survivor should look like, what they should act like, and every survivor looks different.
Yes.
I may not be one of your tropes that you're saying. I may make a nice income. I may make 90,000. I might not be on public assistance. You
Yes.
know, so we have to get away from what the perfect survivor looks like as working as mainstream communities work with our communities. Thank you all so much. I'm headed to our last question, and then do have, well, I can't say last because I do have a closing question. But how can prevention initiatives center survivors' voices while also engaging those who have not experienced violence directly? Kalan, I can start with you. Go ahead.
Okay, so I often think about the conversations I've had with my survivors, and one thing that comes up again and again is that they know what safety looks like for them, right? They have this picture, but they just do not have the resources or the support to get there. So when we talk about prevention, it starts with really listening to survivors and honoring their experiences. It's letting those voices guide the work that we do. But we also have to make sure that we can show up in ways that feel safe for them. And at the same time, we need to bring in the whole community, friends, family, neighbors, because safety can't just sit on the shoulders of someone who's already been harmed, right?
Yeah.
Mhm.
It's something we all have a role in. And when you see both of those things happening, survivors being heard and the community showing up, that's when prevention starts. And that's when people begin to truly feel supported and not just told what to do.
Mhm.
Absolutely. Thank you. Would you like to add something, Antonia?
Um, Ask that question again.
Yeah, sure. The question is, sorry, lost my how can prevention initiatives center survivors' voices
Mhm.
while also engaging those who have not experienced violence directly?
And again, that goes back to targeted messaging.
Okay.
That goes back to designing culturally specific services, culturally specific messaging that uses authentic messengers, that you directly uses the voices, that has the images of who that target population is, and saturating communities with that information. It means bringing up leadership among the populations that you are targeting. And so making sure that we are bringing the people on necessary to reach populations that we are targeting. An example is, there's I believe the number of women, or the largest group of women being murdered in the U.S., particularly the Black community, is between 18 and 44.
Mm,
So, what is it about that population? For one, we got to design messaging for that population.
that's right.
And it captures words and images of individuals from that community. So that's how we empowerment. People empower themselves. We give them the tools, the information, the resources, and supports for them to make the choice to be able to do that,
Mm,
to be able to empower themselves with information and support what it is that they do. So much of it has to do with our messaging
yeah,
and who we are using to deliver
yeah,
these messages, and making sure they're on vehicles
yeah.
that are most used by that
Yeah.
population.
Yeah, I definitely think that survivors' leadership is essential. I
Yes.
also, think that prevention requires everyone, as I mentioned earlier, and not only survivors. And I would like to invite our viewers to think about their own role in prevention. It's all of our responsibility. So I want to invite the viewers, think about what is your role in prevention as well. So as we're closing out and we're wrapping up today's conversation, I love to leave our audience with a sense of hope and action. I already gave them one. But however, I would like to hear from the both of you. If there is one message you will want viewers to remember about preventing violence in Black communities, what
About
would it be?
what? Because you
Oh,
kind of,
I'm sorry. If
if
there is one message you want viewers to remember about preventing violence in Black communities, what would it be? And what is one action each of us can take today to help build a safer and healthier community?
My big, oh,
go ahead. Go ahead, Kalan.
my biggest message is that survivors, you are not alone, and prevention belongs to all of us. We all have a part and a role to create a safer home and stronger families and a healthier community. And when and how to do that is by leading with support, being accountable and holding others accountable that you love, showing love, and providing the help that makes healing possible.
And my hope is that people support culturally specific services. Donate resources, your
Yeah.
funds to those efforts. So that's my biggest hope is that you give uh, to those organizations in your community because culturally specific services are those that are least funded, but they do a great deal more of the work. And so, for Black advocates in particular, my hope is that we begin to stop simply managing harm and begin being transformative um, in the conditions that create violence in our community. So this means building early intervention strategies that identify risk long before violence escalates. So it means to resist treating or stop treating domestic violence and community violence intervention separately or the other intersecting issues, bringing individuals together similar to domestic violence because there's multiple intersecting issues. So bringing these fields together, the domestic violence field, the community violence intervention, gun violence, substance use, mental health, trauma exposure, and the like. So that is one way that I know we can begin to have these kinds of conversations that will help us instead of managing harm, but begin to transform the conditions.
Yes, absolutely. And of course, I love your first one, funding. So many,
Yes.
so many Black and grassroots organizations have been doing this work for so long, for generations. You think all the way back, like folks have been doing this work for free,
Yes.
taking people into their homes, reaching out to other folks in the faith-based community and in our communities. Can she stay here? She needs to stay here. Can you take her for a little bit? She got to get out of that house. And they are advocates and they should be paid equitably. I
Yes.
love that. And also there was something else you said, but I'm in my 40s, so the train has left the station. But this was fabulous. And another word that I hear is just collective work and responsibility. And
Yes.
that is Ujima,
That
right?
is Ujima.
That is,
Yeah.
and so we all have a responsibility. We all can do prevention work. We have so much work to do. So with that, I thank you both for being
Thank
here.
you.
Kalan,
Thank you for having us. Thank you.
absolutely. It was fabulous meeting you. I'm so happy. And Antonia, like you are just breathtaking. You are a mentor. You have dropped so many gems just on today and throughout your tenure into this work. So I really appreciate you both for coming on today. And I'm going to, all right, that is our Ujima Talk.